who's gonna get the blue one, and who's gonna get the black one, and who's gonna get the red one, and who's gonna get the orange one. I want to know everybody's special talent. I want to know everybody's special dragon, and I want to know what mine would be if I was in this world. Can somebody make a quiz for me, because I want to know. Okay, so this is take 4 now, but this is gonna be the one I can feel it. Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm making a video that I probably should have done as my first video, as like a get to know me, but this was actually a suggestion that I got on my first video in the comments. So thank you for the suggestion. Today I'm going to be talking about my favorite books of all time. I started reading again probably, I think it was right before the pandemic, and I had subscribed to Book of the Month Club, and so I was reading like basically a book a month. And that was a really great way for me to get kind of back into reading. I used to read a lot as a kid, and that kind of helped bring me back into it. And it's been, I guess, like, actually it's probably been 5 years now that I've consistently been reading, which is really, it makes me really happy because it's my favorite thing to do now, honestly. As I have been rediscovering reading, I would say that there are 4 genres that have kind of resonated with me the most, and that is contemporary fiction, romance, thriller, /mystery, and fantasy. But for the purpose of today's video, I have condensed that into 3 genres, so I have combined romance and fiction for this, just to keep it concise. I'm going to talk through today my 5 favorite books from each of those genres. So there will be 15 books total, and yeah, 5 for fantasy, 5 for fiction, and 5 for thrillers /mystery. So let's get into it. So I'm going to start with fiction, because that was kind of what got me back into reading. I think I started there, and so I'm gonna go grab those books, and I'm gonna grab them as I film this, because if I grabbed them all at once, this whole bookshelf behind me would be totally dismantled and it wouldn't look very cute. So we'll start with fiction. And this one. So for fiction and romance combined, fiction and romance, I actually probably read this book before I was actually consistently reading. I probably read this book. I think I read this book in 2019 and just absolutely loved it. I guess you could probably count it as a thriller, but in my mind it's more fiction, so I've included it in fiction. But this first book is Where the Crawdads Sing. I just like devoured this book and really, really enjoyed it. It's about a girl who's living on her own as like a teenager in the marshes of North Carolina. She's kind of an outcast, like a social outcast, if you will, and people really make fun of her because she's very poor, because she's providing for herself as a teenager and basically escaping child services and avoiding child services. And she is very in tune, I would say, with the nature around her, like with the swamp. This book is so descriptive when it comes to setting and like atmosphere and environment. Like there's some really lovely writing in this book about animals and just like the natural world, I guess. And this main character in this book as well, she's an artist, and so she like illustrates all of these drawings of birds and feathers and like all of the things that she sees in her daily life around her. But what this book really is about is somebody is found dead in her town in the marsh, and she immediately gets pegged as the top suspect because she's such a social outcast. It kind of follows that crime, but also follows her life. This was really lovely. They've made a movie out of this book. Taylor Swift wrote a song for this book. Like, this book really, I think, got me back into reading more so than anything that I had ever read up to that point. So this book goes definitely in my all-time favorite fiction books. The next one that I just loved so much when I read it, and I still love to this day, was a Book of the Month pick. And again, this actually could maybe count as a thriller, but I think it's more fiction as well. And this one is Once There Were Wolves. This one, I loved this book so much. Kind of like the last one, it has a lot of like environmental themes in it. And so this book is about a woman who moves to Scotland to help reintroduce wolves to the Scottish Highlands. And that decision is very polarizing for that community because it's like there's a lot of farmers in their community, and so they're terrified that the wolves are going to eat all of their animals and take away their livelihood. So that's the general setting. And then of course somebody winds up dead in the community and everybody thinks must be her wolves, like the wolves killed somebody, but she knows it's not the wolves, which means that there's probably a murderer in their community. There's also some more drama with like her and her sister. Her sister's overcoming like a really traumatic incident that she experienced where they were living before. So it's kind of like a whodunit, but it's very like, it's like ecology almost. And like, I really like animals. And so this one was such a favorite for me. And also if you're looking to read this, it's pretty short. It's only like 250 pages. So it goes fast. This one, top 5 Once There Were Wolves. My next one could probably fall into the romance category. Actually, it would fall into the romance category, but because I've combined them, it's in fiction, and that is The 7-Year Slip. I've actually recently recommended this to 2 people. The first has already read it and she loved it. It's so cute. It has like a little, like some elements of magic, so I would actually call this magical realism. It's about a book publicist who, she's living in New York City and she inherits her aunt's apartment. So she's living in this apartment and suddenly out of the blue, she finds herself back in time 7 years, hence the name. I like had to think for a minute. I'm like, how long did it send her back? 7 years, which is the name of the book, obviously 7-Year Slip. So it sends her back in time 7 years into the past, and she meets a man who was staying in her aunt's apartment while her aunt was traveling with her, actually. So she meets him in the past and she falls in love with him in the past. But the way that this apartment works is it keeps like sending her back to the past and then sending her back into the future. So it all comes down to like her going in and out of this apartment when she's entering, like going through the door, and it's kind of at random. So it goes back and forth between like present day and in the past, and she does end up meeting him in the present. So it's a really cute love story. This one really talks a lot about grief and healing from grief. So if you like food, if you like romance, if you like a little bit of magic, if you like life in New York City, this would be a great one for you, and that's why it is in my top 5 fiction of all time. The 2 that I have left for fiction are some of my favorite authors of all time. I say that having only been reading again for like 5 years, but some of my favorite authors as I've rediscovered reading. And the first one, this book made me cry so much. 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and actually this is like the special edition. I had to get it because I just loved it that much. But this book is incredible, and Taylor Jenkins Reid is like a really phenomenal fiction writer, and she's kind of more historical fiction a little bit with some of her stuff, not all of it, but this one in particular takes place, well, it takes place in the present, but it goes back and forth in time. So there's like a non-linear timeline. Basically, this book is about a journalist who gets tasked with telling the story of a very famous actress's life. And so this book, it goes back and forth from the present and the past. In the present, it's the journalist kind of interviewing and getting to know Evelyn Hugo. And then when it goes back in time to the past, it's telling Evelyn Hugo's story. And so the way that it's structured, in this book, she has 7 husbands. And so it's kind of split up into parts. You can think of them like eras of all of her husbands. But this book is really heartbreaking, but really sweet at the same time. It talks about Hollywood in the 50s through the 80s. It explores, I think, themes of like diversity in Hollywood in the 80s and, how women were treated in Hollywood in the 80s. It's so incredibly good. If you are trying to get into fiction and you want to read something that is just incredibly amazing, this is a great fiction pick. My last fiction, this is romance, but fiction book for my top 5 by another one of my favorite authors is Funny Story by Emily Henry. Maybe you're just getting started reading and you want to read romance. Emily Henry is a great place to start. I think what resonates with me about Emily Henry's books is that her writing is like very funny. So it's entertaining. Like it's not going to be boring because the voice that she has in her writing is like very humorous. But this book was so good. This actually just came out in 2024, so it's her newest book. She's got one coming out this year, but this is her most recent. And it's about, this is like a crazy premise, but the main character, her fiance breaks up with her and leaves her for his best friend. And so with like no place to go, no place to live, she moves in with her ex-fiance's new girlfriend's ex-fiance or boyfriend. Ex, we'll just say ex. And so they move in together because they're both kind of, he's without a roommate, she's without a place to live. So they move in together and they develop this really incredible friendship. So the general plot of the story is that Daphne, the female main character, wants to leave Michigan after her engagement ends because she's like, nothing is keeping me here. But Miles, who is her new roommate, does everything in his power to convince her to stay. And so this book, he is like taking her to all of these like lovely, charming places that he's discovered to try to show her like how lovely their town is and to convince her to stay in Michigan. And so, oh, it's just, I'm getting the chills just talking about this because it was so sweet, so lovely. It's a great like small town romance. The like conditions in which these two like meet each other is crazy. She's like a children's librarian. It's really, really lovely. It's one of my favorite romance, actually probably my favorite romance that I read in 2024. So Funny Story is kind of rounding out my top 5 of favorite fiction/romance books. All right, so next we are going to talk about thrillers because that was, honestly, thrillers are probably really like what got me into reading, but I guess really it was fiction. But then I went into thrillers and I went through a hardcore thriller binge. I still love thrillers. Like if I need something like really quick and easy to read, if I'm in a reading slump and I need something to dig me out of it, I usually go for a thriller because they are, I mean, you're just turning pages, just like give me all of it. So let's talk about my top 5. The first one that really, really like made me discover, I think, what kind of thrillers I like most was The Silent Patient. I feel like this book is controversial because people either really like it or they really don't. This is a minor spoiler, okay, for this book. I'm not gonna like give you the details, but just a minor spoiler. So if you haven't read this and you want to read it and you don't want a spoiler, skip ahead like 5, 10, 15 seconds. Okay, I hope they're gone. If they don't want spoilers, I hope they're gone. The reason why I love this book so much, and one of my favorite themes in thriller books in general, is the unreliable narrator. I will eat it up every time. So basically, the premise of this book is it follows a therapist who takes on a new patient, and she's kind of like notoriously famous because she murdered her husband and then refused to talk about it and hasn't spoken since that happened. So this young therapist basically thinks that he's gonna be able to crack her and get her to talk about what happened. So it's like, it's kind of creepy because she doesn't speak and she killed her husband, but it's like very twisty, and obviously they're trying to figure out why she killed him. So it's trying to like unravel that story. But the twist in this book was so amazing that I would say like for a couple years, like this was the standard for thriller books that I was reading. Like this, I was comparing every thriller book I read to this. How good was it? Was the twist as good as The Silent Patient? Like, was my jaw on the floor like it was in The Silent Patient? So for that reason, this book is definitely in my top 5. Okay, the next one, Daisy Darker. The thriller books that have me turning pages the fastest are the ones where like people are trapped somewhere. Usually it's like on an island, but like they're trapped somewhere, they can't get out, and somebody's killing them all and help can't get to them. And so like, it's like how many people are gonna get knocked off before they discover who it is or before somebody comes to save them. It's very like Agatha Christie-esque, or like Glass Onion. What was the first one? The Glass Onion was the second one. What was that first one called? But you know what I mean. Like those movies. It's very Agatha Christie, like Death on the Nile. It's very like Glass Onion. And it's like this concept of people just getting knocked off one after the other and like who's gonna be next and who's doing it. And that's what this book is. And so basically it's about a family who is kind of been like scattered and they don't get along very well, so they don't see each other very often, but they're finally all together again for this one weekend, and it's their grandmother's birthday. They're like stuck together at her house, which is on an island in the middle of the ocean, and the only way that you can get from the island to the mainland is by boat, or at low tide, there's like a strip of land that you can walk along. So at midnight, the grandmother is found dead as this like giant storm is raging and they're disconnected from the mainland. And then every hour later, on the hour, somebody else is killed. And so the premise is, again, who's killing them? Which family member is killing them? Who has the most motive? And this one, there's actually like, it's not just surface level kind of whodunit like that. It's like, there's actually quite the backstory into this that is crazy as to why the person who's doing it is doing it. And so it like, oh, this one, I was flipping pages so fast, like this one kept me on my toes, like it was awesome. I feel like I really like fumbled everything I was trying to say in that one, but hopefully you got the picture. Okay, next, these are all kind of recent, but I'm gonna go, this is another book of the month one, and that is None of This Was True. I am not even exaggerating when I say that no other book has made me more uncomfortable than this one. In a good way, okay? Like, as far as thrillers go, like, this one was so creepy. So this one follows a podcaster, and she's out celebrating her birthday, and she bumps into this woman who's also celebrating her birthday, and they're the same age. So they kind of, like, weirdly are like, oh, like, birthday twins, okay, like, we're hitting it off. Like, not a lot, but like, oh, like, that's so funny, like, nice to meet you kind of thing, and then that's it. But she keeps bumping into the same woman, her birthday twin, and this woman, she basically, like, proposes to the podcaster that she should create podcasts about this woman's life. And the podcaster's kind of like, why? But like, okay. And so they do it, and long story short, like, this woman who asked to be featured on the podcast, her name is Josie, like, she basically tries to take over the podcaster's life. Because she's famous, and she's beautiful, and she's rich, and she's got the perfect life, and the perfect marriage, and the perfect child, and she low-key tries to, like, take over her life. And, like, inserts herself so much. If you like books or movies that are creepy because somebody's obsessed with the other character, like to a point that's unhealthy, this would be a good one for you. And I'm not even kidding, like this book made me so incredibly uncomfortable because of that. So if you like good thrillers, you like that kind of like possessive, creepy, I want to be you vibe, this might be for you. The next one that I want to talk about is less of a thriller and more of a mystery, and it's kind of a cozy mystery. But I love this book more than almost anything, and that is The Maid. The reason that I love this so much is that the main character, it's never like explicitly said, but I'm almost positive that she's autistic. And so as somebody who is neurodivergent as well, like I really loved seeing that representation of a neurodivergent character, because the main character, her name is Molly. Because she's autistic, she's really bad at picking up on social cues. And so she works at this hotel as a maid, and she experiences a murder, kind of. She finds a body in a hotel room as she's cleaning it, and very quickly becomes the top suspect because she doesn't know how to interact with people in social settings, and she's really bad at socializing. And it follows her basically trying to solve the murder to prove that she's innocent. It's very cute, it's very cozy, it's low stakes, like it's not gonna scare you, it's just really sweet. It also, I think, will make you sad though, because people really take advantage of those who maybe are neurodivergent and don't have the best social skills. That happens, but it's just a really lovely mystery, and it's a great representation of people who are neurodivergent. So this definitely works its way into my top 5 of thrillers and mysteries. And then lastly, for thrillers and mysteries, this is a thriller. Wrong Place, Wrong Time. This one was so good. Like, I loved this one so much. It's also a little bit magical in the sense that there's time travel involved. It's about this woman who witnesses her son murdering somebody. And obviously, rightfully so, like her and her husband freak out and like have no idea why he did it. But then every single day that she wakes up sends her back in time. It's sending her back in time to solve why her son maybe decided to kill this person, what connection this person has to her family, why her son would do this. So I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil anything, but I'll just say that like the characters in this book are so big. I just love them so much. I don't think out of all of the thrillers that I've read, I hadn't resonated with characters. Well, not resonate, I shouldn't say that. But I haven't loved characters as much as I've loved these characters. Like that usually doesn't happen for me in thrillers. Like it doesn't really matter who the people are. It's more about the story. But this one, I loved these characters. And I just wanted the best for them. But this was really, really good. And it definitely keeps you on your toes. And you are also like, what is going on? Like, I need to figure this out. And you're right there with that main character as she's trying to figure out why her son would kill somebody. But anyway, Wrong Place, Wrong Time. One of my favorites. And I listened to the audiobook for this. And the audiobook was actually really awesome. So this one, super great thriller with a little bit of magic and time travel involved. And this was great. Those are my top 5 thrillers / mysteries. And so that's 10 books down. Now let's get into fantasies. Fantasy has been the newest genre for me that I've been like consuming. And I do think that it's my favorite now. I mean, it's easy to say because I'm currently like very much in a fantasy kick, but it's definitely my favorite genre right now. And so a lot of these books that I'm going to share are like the books that really got me into fantasy or like got me invested, or I don't know, made me cry. A lot of these made me sob like a baby, or I thought were like really beautifully written, or the worlds and the world building was really complex but like brilliant. So let me go get my fantasy books and I'll be right back. Last category, let's fly through this. I think as I've been doing this, I've kind of been like starting with the book that got me into each genre. So we are going to follow that trajectory that I have laid out previously in this video and start with Fourth Wing. This is very timely right now because the 3rd book in this series is about to come out, so I'm sure a lot of people are reading this, talking about this right now. But Fourth Wing, this was the first fantasy book that I read as an adult, and it got me so hooked that I haven't been able to stop, obviously. This book, if you don't know what this is about, if you've been living under a rock, that's okay. I'll tell you, don't worry. This book is about a war college, and it follows the section of the war college that are training to be dragon riders. It's very dangerous, it's very deadly. I really like academic fantasies, like that take place in an academic setting. And I also really like, this is hard to describe, but when people get categorized or they discover something that's unique to them, and everybody discovers the same thing, but it's unique for each person and everybody's is different and specific, I love that. It's so hard to explain, and I know that I'm not explaining it well. The reason why I love this is because all of the characters, well, not all of them, most of the characters bond with a dragon. And all of the dragons have their own unique personalities, and they choose their riders for very specific reasons. And who's gonna get the blue one, and who's gonna get the black one, and who's gonna get the red one, and who's gonna get the orange one? Why? Because this one's cunning and that matches with that. Like, I love that. And then beyond that, everybody gets a signet, which is a special power that's unique to them. And so I wanna know what everybody gets. This person gets like metal bending, and this person can summon objects, and this person can summon lightning, and this person has... I want to know everybody's. I want to know everybody's special talent. I want to know everybody's special dragon, and I want to know what mine would be if I was in this world. Can somebody make a quiz for me, because I want to know. But that's why I loved this book so much, is because it had all of these elements where everybody got all of these things, or like they bonded with a dragon, they got the special ability, and I was like devouring this book in the beginning because I wanted to know what dragon the main character was gonna get. Like, I needed to know, and so I flew through this. And then of course, like, the storyline hooks you, the characters hook you. There's an absolutely tragic book death in this book that broke my heart. I remember sitting on the couch next to my boyfriend, absolutely sobbing, but trying to hide it because I didn't want him to be like, what is wrong with you? But like, if you know, you know. This is just a great fantasy, and it opened up a totally new world for me in the fantasy genre. And so I will always love this book. I've already reread the whole series. I probably will reread this book all the time, but I will never be able to experience it like I did for the first time. And so if you want to get into fantasy, this is a great place to start. Then I read ACOTAR. So I read A Court of Thorns and Roses. I will tell you that I didn't like the first book that much, but I loved this one. So A Court of Mist and Fury is in my top 5. It's funny, like, ACOTAR as a series doesn't really stand out to me anymore because I've read so many other books. But like, I included this book because it does definitely have a place in my heart. I think when it comes to that series, this was the book that made me realize, like, oh, like, this series slaps. Like, this series, it's pretty good. This was my first experience with fae, which I love now. Like, if a book has fae in it, I'm like, ooh, okay, like, I'm sold. The first one, like, I don't even want to talk about ACOTAR. Like, I did, the first book, like, 3 stars. It was mid, okay? Like, this one, though, 5, okay? It was so good. The world building and, like, the descriptions, like, I can picture it so clearly in my head. The characters are awesome, and it really just, like, this is a whole other world compared to the first book. I think, like, what stands out to me about this book is just the feeling and the, like, the awe and the shock and the surprise that I experienced as I read this. It just makes me really happy to think about it. But yes, this definitely makes it into my top 5 and is, in my opinion, the best book of the ACOTAR series. I read ACOTAR, and then I knew that I wanted to go into Throne of Glass, but I, like, gave myself some time. I took a little bit of a break, and then I did start Throne of Glass at the beginning of 2024. And I read the entire series, and I honestly probably could have put all of the Throne of Glass books as my top 5 for fantasy. But that didn't feel fair, so I decided to pick one book from the Throne of Glass series to include in this video. And it's Kingdom of Ash. The whole series was, like, such a crazy ride, and it, like, the evolution from book 1 to book 8 was mind-boggling. Like, it feels like a completely different series. I'm listening to the audiobooks right now, and so right now I'm in Crown of Midnight. I am mind-blown as I'm listening to that, how different it is from this. Like, the series just snowballs into something totally bigger and crazier than whatever is laid out in the beginning. So I just think that this book is a phenomenal end to the series. I cried so hard to this book. It wrapped it up so perfectly. I love all of the characters with my entire heart. Some of my favorite book characters of all time are in, actually, probably not even some of, just period. My favorite book characters of all time are in this series, in this book specifically. This is, like, in my opinion, peak high fantasy, like crazy wars and battles and just, like, amazing plots and twists, and it's awesome. So this is actually, out of all of these, my favorite fantasy of all time, and probably my favorite book of all time. So I finished reading Throne of Glass, and I fell into a post-book depression that I have never known. And I truly didn't think that there was anything out there that was going to compare to that. After Throne of Glass, the next fantasy that I read, it actually did compare. Not quite to that level as Kingdom of Ash, but I think once this series progresses, it will be top-notch. And so the next book is When the Moon Hatched. Sorry, my throat. This book was so good. I've seen a lot of, like, people kind of trashing this book on Instagram lately, which makes me very mad because this book I thought was beautiful and lovely, and the world building is, like, so, it goes hard. I'm trying to, like, remember how to describe this book and what it's about, and I'm actually failing to remember. This is so bad. Let me put it in simple terms. Dragons, amazing book boyfriend, like Cassian energy, like Khal Drogo from Game of Thrones energy, like I will cut off the head of your enemies energy, dragons, really complex world building, like burn the world for you energy. That's what this is. I will tell you that the world building in this is really complicated, and so you really just have to push through the first 150 to 200 pages before you're like, then it'll click for you. But you have to just power through, and like, you really have to like dedicate some time to sit down and like, and pay attention To this one, you can't just like read a couple pages here and there. Like you have to like dedicate time to it because it is complicated. But once you get through those first 150, 200 pages, it'll click and it'll fly and it'll be really good. You just have to trust the process with this one. But this was just incredible, and I'm so excited for the next book. It left on such a cliffhanger, and I love this main character so much, like more than Evelyn from Throne of Glass. This goes into my top 5 for sure. To wrap this up, this is probably gonna be a long video. I think this is the longest that I've ever filmed. I read this book in the fall, and it was the perfect cozy fall fantasy, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries. This one is very different from everything else that I've talked about in this video as far as fantasy so far, and that is because this book is about a scientist who studies the Fae. She's trying to create an encyclopedia about all of the different breeds of Fae in their world. But she travels to like the north to try and study their like version of ice Fae. Like they call them the hidden ones, but they're like the cold Fae, like the wintry Fae. But so she travels to this little town where she is staying to study these people, and she has like a academic rival, like a rival professor who she like doesn't really like, but like he's such a sweetie and such a sweetheart. But he has like a mysterious background that she's kind of trying to figure out while she's there. This one is just, it's cute. It's very cozy. It's perfect for winter, honestly. And the characters are so good. And it's so cute. It's low, I would say it's low stakes fantasy. Like I never worried as I was reading this that anybody was gonna die. Like very low stakes, very cozy. There's like a few points of like conflict and resolution, so it's not like a big build up and then, you know, it's like a little bit of this, a little bit of this, a little bit. So it's really chill. The characters are super cute. It still has like the magical like Fae aspects to it. I don't know. It's much more like casual and chill and cozy. I will say that it's written in a very scientific way. So if that's not your thing, if you want like very simple writing, this one probably isn't for you because it's written kind of in like older language-ish because it takes place in the early 1900s, maybe late 1800s. I can't exactly remember, but like in that time frame. And she's a professor and she's a scientist. So it's written very interestingly. There's literally footnotes in this. There are 2 books in this series that are out so far. The 3rd book comes out in February. So again, a great time to pick this one up. Yeah, this is a good cozy one. Very different from the others, but still, I just love this book. Of course it made it into my top 5. So that wraps up my favorite fantasy books of all time, which in turn wraps up this whole video. Those are my favorite books of all time, my favorite fantasy, my favorite fiction and romance, my favorite thriller mystery. Let me know in the comments if you have read any of these and we can like giggle about them together. Or if you haven't read any of these and you have questions, let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. But that is this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next week. Bye.